all of the hot button issues, it seems that Joseph Smith was creating a document to kind of give answers to many of those controversies.
Right. Contemporary concerns.
His mother says in her own description of his life that he was very interested in the theological controversies of his day. Mm-hmm. And we also know that within his family, there were various seekers and skeptics. And there's a very important episode that happens when his uncle comes by the house and he's talking with his father. And his uncle is very much a fan of Thomas Paine and the Age of Reason. Mm-hmm. And the uncle and father get into some kind of a theological argument. And as Joseph's uncle leaves, he takes the copy of Paine's Age of Reason and throws it through the front door. And, basically, hey, just read it, right? And you'll know better. Joseph Smith, even though his family wasn't really a church-going family, he read the Bible a lot, and he was convinced that it's true, that Christianity is true. His uncle and similar skeptics are mistaken. But wouldn't it just be nice if the evidence was a bit more clear? Mm-hmm. And I think that what we have in the Book of Mormon is an example of a phenomenon that has occurred throughout Jewish and Christian history, in which people will write texts that are set in the past, in the biblical period, in relation to biblical figures or kinds of figures, in order to address doctrinal, or in the case of Judaism, halakhic disputes of their own day.
Yeah, so like the intertestamental writings, you say, like the
you get things like the Enochic literature, Second Baruch, the Temple Scroll from Qumran, lots of texts in antiquity. Yeah. You also get it in a Christian environment with some of the Gnostic Gospels and such.
Right.
Some of the pseudepigraphal letters attributed to New Testament figures. Yeah. I think Joseph Smith has a very elaborate a version of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But where that comes to, in terms of Mormons who accept the Book of Mormon's claims that it's an ancient translated text that's authoritative for doctrine, you get a tension then between the text of the Book of Mormon and Joseph's evolving teachings over time, where he's claiming further and further revelation. I would look at it and say, well, I think what happens is that the initial answers that he gives to various theological disputes, he realizes don't actually solve those problems. Mm-hmm. So he has to postulate more and more radical ideas. So you take something like issues with problem of evil, predestination, free will. Book of Mormon, it looks like he's a free Methodist or a free will Baptist, right? Mm-hmm. Very strong view of free will, but it's very much within this, the kindest of view you find within Orthodox Christianity. He's eventually going to say, well, actually, human beings have always existed, and they've always had free agency.
Right.
So then you get out of the problem that, well, if God created us, couldn't he have created us differently? Mm-hmm. Couldn't he have created us so we don't fall and don't sin? Couldn't he have created us without free will? Right? Some of the kinds of issues that people today raise against standard Christian teaching.
Right.
Well, Joseph Smith, takes a more radical position and says, well, God didn't, in the most basic sense, he did not create us at all. We are co-eternal with God. Some part of us, our intelligence, has always existed, and its fundamental characteristic is free agency. And you have to say, well, that's a very clever move.
Yeah.
Right? If that's true, it gets you out of certain versions of the problem of evil.